We're now being joined by independent journalist Anthony Louis Winston. He's the author of both the Palestine Lab and was based out of East Jerusalem for 4 years, that is between 2016 and 2020. Welcome to the show, Mr. Winston.
Thank you very much for having me.
Right. Now, the humanitarian cost of the war is paramount. At least 2,400 people have been killed on both the sides of the war, and the relentless airstrikes by Israel, coupled with disrupting electricity and other essential supplies, have clearly jeopardized the lives of Gazans.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, one thing that has been very clear is that Gazans are living in an open-air prison. It's actually the world's largest open-air prison. There's about 2.5 million of them. They can't leave. They don't have freedom of movement. They're being bombed relentlessly. As a journalist, I've been to Gaza a number of times. I've reported from there. I've spent time with Hamas as a reporter. And it's a beautiful place in many ways, quite isolated and quite different from the other parts of Palestine. And yet at the moment, in the last years, it's been under blockade by Israel and Egypt. And right now, in the last days, I have friends in Gaza who I speak to who are okay at the moment, but of course they wonder. Their apartment blocks are being bombed. There's nowhere safe to go. There are no bomb shelters, and it's a really grave situation. And we're at a stage now where all the Western countries are 110% backing Israel and demonizing Palestinians. Now, we can, as we should, demonize and criticize what Hamas did. It was an absolutely outrageous and criminal act on the weekend. But that's different to actually saying that there are 2.5 million Palestinians in Gaza who are now under attack for a crime committed by Hamas.
Right, I was just coming to the point you made there, that the Palestinians in Gaza who have come under intense airstrikes from the Israeli side, and Israel has been staunch on eliminating Hamas militancy once and for all, and reiterating the same. Netanyahu today as well said that every Hamas member is a dead man. My question to you is that how will the Israeli military be able to translate this into a very clear and achievable objective? The paramount question, the pertinent question being that will they be able to identify Hamas from Palestinians?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I would argue that it's actually impossible to rout out Hamas. You can kill a lot of Hamas leaders, both in Gaza, and many of the leaders, in fact, are in the Arab and Muslim world. So I suspect in months and years to come, you'll see a global assassination campaign led by Israel of killing many of these leaders. But even if you do that, nothing changes for the facts on the ground in Palestine. There's been a decades-long occupation in Palestine by Israel, where Palestinians are treated as second-class citizens, where Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International and others have called the situation their apartheid. That's the reality for Palestinians. So Israel can go into Gaza and flatten the place, destroy huge amounts of infrastructure and kill lots of people. But at the end, in the end, as someone like Gideon Levy, who's an Israeli journalist, a great journalist, has said regularly, including this week, there is no military solution to this question. There is none. There is no military solution to dealing with the Israel-Palestine conflict. Eventually and inevitably, there will need to be negotiations. Of course, right now that feels very, very far away, but that's the only way that it's ever going to resolve.
Right. You're also an expert on Israeli intelligence as well. And Egypt had earlier warned Israel of something big, basically the airstrikes on the Israeli territory. But Israel has clearly refuted these claims. Do you think that the US is also displeased or miffed at Israeli intelligence agency Mossad, which is renowned to be one of the best in the world, for sitting on that intel and not taking any action?
Look, obviously, I've seen those reports too, and I suspect in the months to come we'll find out more. I mean, clearly Egypt claims to have informed Israel. We don't quite know who they informed. We don't know the details of that information. I mean, Israeli intelligence failed. There's no other way to get around that. But so did American intelligence. I mean, America has a massive presence in the Middle East. They run the NSA, which is the world's biggest intelligence gathering outlet. They also missed it, apparently. And it's interesting to find out, as I'm starting to do, how this actually happened. It seems like Hamas didn't use much, digital devices. They spoke very in small groups. They didn't really use mobile phones. There's a huge way to avoid the most hugely technological advances. I mean, ultimately, America may be upset with Israel, but frankly, Israel's probably also upset with themselves and with America. But the bigger picture here as I talk about in my book, The Palestine Laboratory, is that Israel has developed huge amounts of tools and technologies to maintain that occupation. Drones, spyware, all those kinds of things. Then they export that around the world to huge numbers of countries. Saudi Arabia, India, Rwanda, and many others. Now, clearly there's a huge breach here, but I suspect that these defense companies will still sell huge amounts of weapons to the world because there's a massive demand of these countries to essentially tackle their so-called unwanted populations.
Right.
And I fear that that won't change, regardless of the total screw-up last weekend.
Right. Your final thoughts on how do you see the Israel-Hamas conflict panning out in the next few days?
Well, badly. I think Israel is going to send in its ground troops. Of course, I don't know when, but in the coming days or week, a massive bombardment from land, sea and air. Palestinians who are stuck there, civilians in Gaza are trapped. They have nowhere to go. The electricity has been turned off. They're running out of power because generators will run out of any kind of gas or oil. And the question really is, what does the international community do? Are they willing to accept huge massacres in Gaza? And I fear the answer to that is yes, because without intervention, pressure on Israel, negotiated settlement and a ceasefire, this will not get any better. It's only going to get worse. So I fear without pressure, this is only going to go in a bad direction.
Right, Mr. Louis Winston, these are unprecedented times, but thanks very much for taking our time and joining us on WION with your insights.
Thank you very much.